Hello, computer science students. Welcome. This is the first video in our inheritance series. And the first thing I want to note about this series is that the code for it, the sample code that you download is already written here. The purpose of this video series is not to teach you how to write a class, but it's more to describe and identify the relationship between classes. In this case, inheritance, which is a relationship. Um, and we'll talk about what that means and what the implications are for it. But it's really about relating one class to another and defining these relationships and organizing classes in a better way. And so, since the goal is not to write a class, and honestly, the actual writing of for the actual coding you have to do to indicate inheritance is not hard at all. Um, the focus is not on the coding, but instead on the concepts and understanding what the relationships will be, so that when you program, you can understand what will happen. So in the code you're given, there's a lot to read and prepare for. And so before I dive in and give my explanations and extra details, I think it's valuable for you to go through and especially look at the person, Phoenix card holder, and the Phoenix card holder class, and even run tester if you want to, and kind of observe what you can from it. And then I'll give an explanation. But I think it's valuable for you to pause the video here and read the comments, especially get an understanding of what this is trying to represent, and then we'll dive into what inheritance actually means. So this is a good time to pause the video. I'll leave a little blank moment or two here. Okay, so assuming that you paused it and read over it, you'll have seen that we have a person class, which is a general person for anyone of record at Elon. Even if you applied and didn't get in, you would be a person recognized in Elon's system. Elon would have made contact with you. And so there is when you are entered in Elon's system, every person has an ID, a first name, and a last name. When we talked about static, we talked about ways of doing IDs a little differently and maintaining a constant ID. We talked about a few problems with our class as well. But here I wanted to highlight that where you have an ID and we're assuming that there's a good system to assign initial IDs, the one method that's missing that we normally might expect is a setter for ID. There's no set ID here. And that's because we're restricting access. Once you are in our system, you have an ID, and that ID will not change. It's something that's important to Elon's system. So that's what we're going to enforce. The other thing I wanted to highlight here, and we're going to circle back to this, is there's a little @override symbol here. This does not look exactly like a comment, and it's not quite the same as a comment, but it is a special thing. And this term override we're going to talk about. This has to do with inheritance, so we're going to dive into it. But the rest of this looks just like the two-string method we've written a couple times at this point. So this is a pretty simple class. The Phoenix card holder gets a little more complex, and you'll see there's a lot more comments here. So there's a lot more to read and understand. And the key is that there is this inheritance relationship. This is a relationship where every Phoenix card holder at Elon is a person, but they also have other information we need to store. So that relationship is what we're going to talk about. And we're going to jump back into these two classes in a couple videos, but first we're going to talk about some really high-level concepts about what inheritance lets us do and some strange things it lets us see in our code. So if we look over here in our tester, and we're going to focus on this for a video or two here, maybe 3 even, but we're going to focus on this for a few videos. And I've already run the code and I've entered Y every time I was prompted, so yes, every time I was prompted for it. And we see some things print out, and these are probably not useful if you just look at the printouts, but if you look at the code and if you look at the comments, I think they will be a little more helpful. So first things first, as we dive in here, you'll notice that I've switched to a dark theme. This is what I normally code in. It helps keep eyes healthier. You can change it in Eclipse. Doing a quick Google search for change Eclipse theme to dark, or go dark theme with Eclipse will help point you to it. But as we go in, before I get started, I want to do one quick little maybe reminder or refresher or clarification in case you haven't run into it before. I'm going to create a method here and then delete it afterwards called like print s. And the idea is that would print a string to the screen. And maybe we'd want to write this to not have to type system.println every time. Now we have our own method that would be like print s, and it reads in a string and just prints it, right? So it prints our input back out to the screen. It's just a little echo. So this is a really, really simple method, a little bit redundant, maybe saves a little coding, especially if you don't know the shortcut for making system.println happen. But this method does have limitations, right? I can't do print s and pass in a number, right? I define this to only take in a string. So I can't pass in 4. I can't do print s 3.6. I can't pass in a double. I can't pass in, like, maybe I could try to print a scanner for some reason. Well, I can't do it, right? Errors pop up every time. And it says that the type that you're passing in does not match the type of the method, right? You told the method I need a string, and I'm going to print the string, but you're giving me not strings, and that's a problem. So that's just a reminder that this is kind of an idea about how programming works so far. You call a method, you tell it what it takes in, and it has to take in that thing. If it doesn't have that thing, that type, we have a problem. However, let's go look at our code. We have a similar method, public static void debug print, and it takes a container, con, and prints it. So in our segment 1 code here, looking at the bottom, the very first thing we do is we make a container called C. And at this point, just know that container is part of the Java language, but we don't really have to know details about it just yet. The details will matter a little bit, but for now we're just going to try to debug print container. And sure enough, it works. It prints. In fact, this little printout should look really familiar, at least similar format, to what we've done in the past for our debug printouts. The variable names themselves are missing here, but it is, the name of the class and path to find it in this case, open square bracket, first variable, second variable, third variable, fourth variable, fifth variable. And then a close square bracket. So again, this format that I'm kind of showing you guys is pretty common and seen in a few different places. So it allows us to debug objects. All right, so there's that. Everything seems like it checks out here. All right, well now I create a frame object. This is another class available in the Java language, and I use debug print to print it. But hold on a second. Debug print takes a container and prints a container. But now I've made a frame and passed a frame in as an argument. There's no other debug print method in here. There's nothing hidden. There's no debug print method hidden somewhere. Right? There's nothing else in here. So there's only one debug print method, and it just takes container, and yet it works. And in fact, when I print the container, it prints a frame, which is what I passed in. So that's a little weird. That's not normal behavior. Clearly there's some other relationship between these classes or something, or Java just broke. I don't know, we'll figure it out. And so the last thing I want to show you is we make a new window. We actually pass the frame object as an argument when we make the window, which is a little detail. But interestingly, we can also debug print our window, and it prints a window. So we have a debug print method that takes containers, and we can print a container, a frame, or a window. So why is that? Well, as we delve through the video series, we're going to find out. And in fact, the next video we'll talk about a couple more weird things we can do. And then we'll talk about what inheritance is and what it means. So I'll see you guys next time.